Welcome to Run With It, Canada's running fitness and health program. On this month's episode of the conversation with Dr. LucasmacMillan on Doctor's Corner. Check this out. Joining me at the Rio Theatre in Vancouver is Dr. LucasmacMillan. He's a naturopathic physician. He's a clinic director of the Delbrook Integrative Medical Centre, and he's here today to talk about a very important topic, hormones. What are hormones, and as we age, how important it is. Welcome, Dr. LucasmacMillan.
Yes, hello. Thanks so much for having me. It's a very important, underserved topic, so I'm really excited to dive into it today.
Yeah, so when should we be concerned about our hormones?
If your body doesn't feel right, I would listen to that. Above all else, our body is constantly speaking to us and telling us what's working, what's not working. If it hurts, it's not normal. It's generally that simple. If anything is ever affecting your sleep, aside from kids and some kind of natural things like what I'm going through a little bit, but anything else, we really should be looking at it and seeing if there's anything we can do to help you out. And if your body doesn't feel well, if you're not sleeping, if you're feeling hot, if you're uncomfortable, listen to that, ask questions, and oftentimes there's really good, simple answers.
So would we be like in our 30s or 40s, 50s? Like when does it start, or does it depend?
Fair, yeah. So for a woman's life cycle, typically that perimenopause, menopause, where we start to really pay attention and things might start to change, is usually somewhere around 45, 50. So the menopausal change on average is about that 52, but you can be plus or minus 5 years easily. So basically, whenever a woman's mother goes through some changes, that's the prime time that she's likely to go through it. It really is probably the best indicator we have. But again, a lot of women don't feel anything that's uncomfortable or don't feel anything off. That's totally fine. We don't necessarily need to look for it. But it's so common that people come into the clinic and it is just such a problem. It's just such an obvious thing that they're not comfortable, they're not able to sleep. We have answers. There's ways that we can address these often very quickly and very simply. So I really want to get that out. There's answers available. If it doesn't feel right, let's talk.
I mean, it's like listening to your body and what it's telling you. But you mentioned something like your mom. It would be sort of like a map of what your mom went through is sort of would be the indicator.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's probably one of the best ways that we can look at it because everybody's different. I mean, the life that you live and some of the risk factors, there might be different person to person. But if we just look, when did things start with your mother? Did they start? What was her experience? I mean, if you have the relationship where you're open enough and where you have access to that information, it's one of the easiest ways to find out. But again, don't need to go looking for problems. If they find you, then there's answers available.
Yes, and it's about education, right? And being armored with the education, as I said. But also, too, is like if you're feeling irritable and you don't know, so it would be best maybe to monitor.
Yeah. So the emotional change can definitely be a piece of it. So if you're starting to find that what used to be a very easy thing for you is now very upsetting, that's sometimes something we pay attention to. But hot flushes and bigger sort of physical symptoms are usually the biggest ones that start to trigger us. We're in that life stage or that there's some answers to be had.
And what other symptoms, like weight gain, maybe?
For some people, yeah, it's an unfortunate time where that's more common. It's not a guarantee, but we see more of that then, definitely. A sensation of decreased stress resilience. So we're starting to feel like the usual stresses that our body could handle very well are now physically affecting us, or that it's hitting us a little bit deeper. It's time to start paying attention. And again, usually around that 45, 50 years of age, this is where this can start to come to life. So if all of these are starting to line up, this could be something to dive into.
Right, and Dr. MacMillan, give us an example, like maybe, I'll say, like if you have like low energy and it takes you like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to brew coffee, I don't want to do this, would it be something like that, perhaps?
It can be, yeah. I wish it was a very short list of things that would cause that. I mean, it's quite a big list, definitely. But yeah, as we've talked about before, yeah, I would start looking into things. How's your thyroid? How's your iron? Let's just be sure the basic behind the scenes parts of your body are working fine, and address those, because you can usually get the answers as to whether that's an issue within a day or two. It's really, really, really fast. So beyond that, yeah, hormones definitely comes into play as one possibility, and I've had a number of people that is their main concern. Just my spouse is getting a lot, and I know it, and I can't stop when it starts, and this is a new problem. So if those things start to happen, well, let's look at it. This could be related to hormones.
Right, and how long should you be monitoring, like generally speaking, like a month, 2 weeks, or does it depend on each individual?
Well, yeah, it changes over time. So if a woman has her menstrual cycle, however long is normal for her, so often 28 days, and that starts to change, basically from there forward until the cycle completely stops for a year, that entire time is something we call perimenopause. And that is the highest likelihood of having some kind of discomfort. Again, that can be your body, that can be your emotions, that can be all different parts. Just we're adjusting from one set of hormones to another. The amount of time that takes, it can be 5 years, it can be 7 years, it can be a little bit less. It's quite variable person to person. So it's even hard to tell exactly when this starts, because it starts very gently. And when we start and when we finish, most people are quite comfortable. It's that transition in between that I think we can do a much better job of letting people know what you're feeling can be normal, and what you're feeling, if it's quite uncomfortable, we can actually help with that. Yes. So just trying to shine the light, because I find that a lot of people are just, they feel like, well, I'm going to be hot, or I'm going to be uncomfortable, I'm going to feel this way, and there's just no possible answers. This is just the way that everybody goes through. It doesn't have to be that way. It really, really, really doesn't.
It's about improving your quality of life.
Yes, above all else, exactly. We want you to be happy, we want you to be healthy, we want to bring that vibrance out. And it's crazy that sometimes people don't have that they start to feel burden. They start to feel like they're moving a little bit slower, and sometimes joint pains are getting worse. Sometimes their body is starting to hurt a little bit more. Sometimes it affects their relationship with their spouse. So we really should get these out into the open and just say, this is a common part of a woman's life, at least for that transition period. If we understand it, if we understand generally what it is, when it starts, and how to help it, then we can make an informed decision as to, do we want to move forward with something? Do we just say, okay, it's okay, this is normal, and that's it? Like some people, just letting them know, your body's going through a change and it is very well equipped to handle it. The job of a healthcare provider is to help you to be comfortable, is to help you to get through and just live your life to the fullest. That quality of life absolutely is the focal point.
And you don't have to go through that, you know, like, well, this is normal, but you can improve your quality of life by, you know, seeing yourself and getting help. And
that's it. At one point it was normal to get sick and to die of all sorts of diseases. We have technologies to take us to the next level, where it still can be a normal experience, but we can do better. We have options to take you to the next level of health or the next level of quality of life. Like, let's have as much fun as we can. Let's have as few down days as we can. Realistically, we're not going to feel 100% all of the time. That's not really the goal. I mean, we're people. We're always going to be people. But I think that the bar has dropped down below where it needs to be. There's a lot more available to help our people.
Yes, and we're ageless, you know, we enjoy our life, rather, you know, we can, you know, there's life, you know, in your 50s and beyond that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big part of why I'm trying to get the point across. I never want to have people be afraid of it. The whole point of the talk, the whole point of what I would love to get out, we don't have to be afraid of it. If you don't feel anything, perfect. Some people don't. If you feel something and it's very manageable and it's okay with you, perfect. That's totally fine. If you're uncomfortable with it, and if we could snap our fingers and make that thing go away or change significantly, often we have answers to do that. We have options. So I want people to know that if it gets really uncomfortable at any point, we can help. We can help you to feel better.
Yes. I'd like to go back to the symptoms.
Yes.
What about sugar cravings?
Yeah, absolutely can be a piece of it. I think a lot of that ties into how well we're sleeping, and there's really good research that if we're not sleeping well, those sugar cravings go way up. Unfortunately, trouble sleeping is a huge part of what we would commonly see. So maybe I'll paint a picture. So a really common person that comes into my office that says, look, I want to talk about usually something else, but when going through the intake form, we also see, well, you're not sleeping well. That's a box ticked. You maybe experience some night sweats that you didn't have before. That's a box ticked. Can be hot flushes during the day, which is related but different. That's another box. Joint pains is a really unexpected or less talked about thing that very, very much peaks around that time, that before the menstrual cycle stops. Joint pains for many people tend to get worse, which is great news. That means it can get better either after or potentially with the treatment. But we can help people to understand this is probably why you're feeling this way. This is some other things that sometimes go hand in hand with that. And here's a little bit of a timeline. So typically, after the menstrual cycle stops for about a year, a lot of these things go away. A lot of it just stabilizes. Our body gets used to this new normal. So a really common experience with my patients is we go through and we either decide, do we want to help to create some change, or do we want to just normalize what you're feeling? Because both of those are very good directions to go. It's up to the patient. It's up to the person in front of me as to what direction they want to go. I'm the person who offers tools and offers information. So here's everything. And then we make a decision together. What makes the most sense to help you feel your best?
Yes. And speaking of feeling your best, we're going to be right back after this break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Today, my guest is Dr. LucasmacMillan. He's a naturopathic physician, and we are talking about the importance of knowing about your hormones. What are the benefits of knowing, if we have a hormone imbalance?
It helps to put the next steps in your control. So a lot of times, if we don't feel our best, we feel a bit out of control. And it feels like these things are either happening to us or just completely out of the realm of what we understand and what we can help. That's not the case. Oftentimes, just understanding, well, this is maybe why these things are happening. Here are some of the triggers, or here are some of the things that make it more likely. And then here are some of the options to help them to just go away or to really smooth it out so you can live your life to the fullest that you want. Biggest thing is we don't ever want changes in our body to get in the way of what we want to do. And wherever we can, we want to give people as much freedom as is possible.
Yes, and it takes a while to, once they get access, it takes maybe a month to feel better, or how does that work?
Good question. Yeah, so it totally depends on the direction we go. So the top two directions would be via herbal or sort of supplemental realm, or through hormones directly. So hormones would be like estrogen, progesterone would be by far the top two that we would use. There's other options as well, but those are really, there's a lot of information. These are very effective. The gold standard, if you have hot flushes, for example, is an estrogen therapy. So give or take, with hormone therapies, people often feel better in a week. We do a full reassessment after a month. It can often be days, maybe a couple days, until people have a significant improvement. So if we want to be more aggressive and go in that direction, which I do for a lot of people, it just ends up being worth it, where they feel like the way that I feel right now is not helping me to feel my best. Let's trial this. Let's find out in a month if this is going to be completely gone or much better. If you go through a herbal route, they tend to be fairly effective. I mean, give or take maybe 70% of the benefits I see with hormones, we can give you with other options, but they take a lot longer to work. It's usually about 3 to 4 cycles or 3 to 4 months before they fully kick in.
Right.
Hopefully faster, but we can't really guarantee or assess until that point. So it does take time, and there's pros and cons to both.
Right, and hormones, are there 4 hormones, like your thyroid, cortisol?
Oh, there's a lot of hormones,
and
yeah.
estrogen. What can you share with our viewers?
Yeah. So probably the biggest focal points, cortisol is one of the major stress hormones. A lot of people talk about it. It changes throughout the day. It spikes shortly after you wake and then goes down through the day. That rhythm is super important. I focus on that with a lot of my people to help them to fall asleep at night and wake up in the morning, be sure these things are happening like they're supposed to. Estrogen, progesterone are by far the biggest ones that change in that perimenopause, menopause time. So they're the biggest focal point and probably the biggest impact we can have to have people feeling better fairly fast. Other big ones are testosterone or DHEA, which actually, DHEA especially has some kind of cool research on, say, sexual satisfaction, on energy. It's one of the things that there might be a therapeutic trial for some patients. It's not something I prescribe, but it's something that they can get access to. That's a big one. Yeah, thyroid hormone is a big part of it. Many of the symptoms that people feel, including the heat, can be similar with thyroid or with those sex hormones that change with menopause. So we want to take a look at both of those and see if there's something going on. But again, one blood test, and we can answer all of those. We have if I run a blood test today, we usually have the results tomorrow. It is a really fast thing to just take this possible list of everything that's affecting you, shrink it down to something really small, say all of these other things aren't affecting you in a way that we care about, put those things aside, we can focus on the few that are left. And often in that perimenopausal time, it's often estrogen, progesterone, because that's the biggest change at that phase of life.
Right, and a simple blood test.
That's it, yeah. It can be very, very simple to rule out a lot of things. If we're assessing hormones, because of the change premenopause to postmenopause and the difference in hormones, there's quite a bit of variability in between. So testing hormones in that time often doesn't really help us. Blood tests are really good at taking everything else, like the thyroid, like cortisol, like iron levels, everything else that can affect how we're feeling. We can basically put those to rest and say it's not those problems with a blood test. Or maybe we will find something there and say we'll go down that direction entirely. So often we start with some kind of lab test just to rule out other things, and then the hormones are something that based on how people feel in the phase of life, we can be pretty confident these things will help.
Right.
A therapeutic trial, sometimes of progesterone, for example, people will have an answer very quickly. Again, usually within a week, but we don't fully reassess to a month. We give it a chance to work.
Right. And what about men's hormones?
Yeah. Well, we all have the same hormone set. There's just different levels. So we have a way more testosterone as men. We also have estrogen. So they play important roles in everybody and in every phase of life. I mean, if men's estrogen levels drop, we have to worry about our bones as well. You know, it's not just a female hormone. It's not something that changes in a woman's life. All the hormone levels change in a man's life, but we focus on it very differently because it changes quite slowly, whereas with a woman, that perimenopausal change is quite abrupt, and there's quite a bit of variability going from here to here, from premenopause to postmenopause.
Right, I mean, like you were mentioning, bone density is huge.
Yes, absolutely. Estrogen is very protective to bones. It's very much that simple. So when a woman steps into the next phase of life, it's not saying her bones will fall apart. It's just the chances go up a little bit. So it's something we want to focus on.
Right.
So it's definitely part of it. Things like urinary tract infections become a bit more common. So these are all things that we look for in that intake to see if hormones are related. We have, again, hot flushes, decreased resilience to stress, that sensation that things are a little bit less handleable versus before. Those are all part of the picture and very much part of what brings people in through the doors to focus on and potentially try to help them.
Right, I mean, we talked about sugar cravings, or like I have, but you know, the food that you eat can really help with hot flashes generally, right? It's what you...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what we put into our body will always matter. Absolutely. So to kind of simplify it, especially with hot flushes, anything that increases adrenaline in the body will increase the likelihood that that happens. So if your blood sugar levels drop and you happen to be susceptible to that, like if you get to a place where your fingers kind of shake, you know, it's been that long, that is a time that you're more likely to have a hot flush. Similarly, right before bedtime, if you go to bed really hungry and you tend to have that blood sugar drop, you're more likely to have those night sweats. So for some people, and again, I can't prescribe things if I haven't met, but for some people, just increasing their protein or increasing basic simple food intake before bed will help them to sleep through the night. And it's fantastic. So sometimes the answers are very simple.
Right.
For some people, that coffee or caffeine just doesn't help, especially if you're having it closer to bed. You're more likely to wake up and more likely to feel a night sweat that you might otherwise have but not be awoken by. So yeah, what we do very much does affect how likely we are to feel these things.
Right, and also too, like, it's not exercise that you were saying. I understand it's movement.
Yeah, I always like to focus on movement. I find the term exercise pushes a lot of people away. It really doesn't have to, you don't have to stand in front of the mirror and lift weights and stare at your biceps. And the image that unfortunately some of my people have when they come in and we want to talk about movement. You can be gardening, you can go for a walk, you can go hiking, you can just get out. Anything that gets your body going through its range is a helpful thing. And yes, it can help people to feel more comfortable in their body, including with some of these hormone changes. Absolutely, we should all be doing this for so many reasons, but hormones included.
Right, and how often should you do it? Like, I mean, I know everyone's different, but like 20 minutes of exercise daily?
Yeah, so most recommendations are somewhere around there, 20 up to about an hour. Interestingly, the longer you sit, regardless of how active you are, the more risk of many things you have. So it's not always just about being super active for that 1 hour and then just checking out playing video games for 23 hours after that. We want to have just general movement built into our lives. So I try to focus on the things that are easy, that tend to have the most impact. If you can move at all every day, that's a good thing. We always start there. If you work at a desk job, like technically I'm in a desk job, I sit with people like this all day. We have our conversations amongst other things. I sit a lot, so I have to take time to stand up, to flex the muscles, to maybe try to touch my toes and bend forward and move. I very much encourage other people to do the same thing. It usually helps you to stay awake, helps you to feel better, and it very much helps your body.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about movement, and we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. I'm here with Dr. Lucas MacMillan. He's a naturopathic physician, and we're talking about a very important topic, hormones. Yeah, so we were talking about movement, and like 20 minutes daily is sufficient.
Yeah, absolutely. My goal is to get people moving. By the research, at 20 minutes to an hour, I mean, to some extent, more is better. We have some research that if you train more than an hour 3 times a week, that some people will have actually a decrease in health versus if they were to go for that 1 hour 3 times a week. Still way better than doing nothing. Don't get me wrong. It's not that we should ever stop being active. There's probably a sweet spot. Listen to your body and just try to move. I love to keep it simple wherever possible. If you feel better with a certain amount of activity, perfect. Listen to that, because yours, mine, and the next person's can be very different.
Yeah, so you were talking about chair, like sitting too long in a chair. I mean, it's good if you're sitting in front of your computer, it's good to take not only eye breaks, but also doing some sort of movement, and that will help.
Yes, our body is designed to move very much. Yes. I mean, sitting here, the blood flow to my legs, when I'm compressing everything back here, it's having more trouble getting up. I really need to move to get that going, and it just feels good. Just, simply squat down or sit on your haunches once in a while. Just drop down, stand back up, get those blood flow and get your muscles alive and moving. It is such a good thing.
Yeah, and I also understand, like, you can have a stand-up desk instead. Like, I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. If your body doesn't feel good sitting for hours in a day, and that's part of your job, if you can make those adjustments, definitely. I mean, we're meant to sit, we're meant to stand, but there's a balance of how much of each we're supposed to do. If you're standing all day, there's other problems that come with that. It's not ideal to be standing for 10 hours straight. It's just, there's a cost to our body if we're not cycling through the usual changes that our body's meant to do. We're meant to do all sorts of things. Like, our body is really an amazing machine. We're driving around this absolutely phenomenal machine all day, but it does very well with breaks. It does very well with changes. So it's if we give it that, our body feels better and performs better.
Yeah, Dr. MacMillan, why do you think generally people don't want to talk about it? Why isn't there enough information out there?
That's a big question. Good question, though. Especially with hormones, it's complicated. And if I have a 3-minute window to explain this to somebody, it's going to be really hard to squeeze all of this in. So I think that too often, especially in our healthcare system today, we're trying to give people as much value as we can in a short amount of time. And that's not as high of a priority as a diagnosis, maybe a prescription, or whatever the treatment is. So I'm honored to be in a place where I can spend an hour or half hour with people to actually talk about these. And I'm trying to get the word out. I mean, via like interviews, via podcasts, just any way to get the information out, because at the very least, we all need to know it. To kind of add another level to that complexity, in a woman's life, there are so many times where hormones change. So there's the pre-puberty whole hormone system. After puberty, the hormones are different. We have the cycles that come with menstruation, etc. If a woman gets pregnant, there's another whole set of hormone changes that happen. So some levels are higher, some are lower. It's not new hormones, but the levels completely change in some cases. After pregnancy and with breastfeeding, the hormones change again. And then she might go back to the regular cycling. She might get pregnant a few other times, go back through those cycles. Then she goes into perimenopause, where there's a significant change, and then postmenopause, where it's another phase. There's a lot of stuff, right? There's a whole lot of changes that happen. So because there's so many steps along the way, and there's a lot of conversation that needs to be had just to scratch the surface with these things, I think it just doesn't happen. So we don't need to understand it to the point of being the practitioner and really diving into the details of what every single thing does. You can, and I love that we live in a place where you can ask those questions, you can look them up. Like, it really is out there. But they're conversations that we should have as to what is normal. And the easiest way by far is what feels normal. Like, what feels best in your body? What doesn't feel great? And oftentimes, if something doesn't feel good, we can have simple answers. So a big part of my practice is helping people through that perimenopause and menopausal hormone change, helping to determine if that's the problem or if that is something that's causing unnecessary barriers in her life, and then offering things to help. So it's just, there's so many ways to do that. There's so many ways to help people. But step one, let's increase awareness that this is a real thing. I mean, half of our population are women. We really should be taking this seriously. And by some estimates, about 70% of women go through a change in their life that is a major, significant, and potentially costly or uncomfortable thing, usually around that perimenopause or menopausal change. Like 70% of women.
Wow.
That is a phenomenally large number. We should absolutely be taking this seriously. And I I don't think we're taking it seriously enough. So trying to get the word out.
Right. I mean, you said 70%. Is that based on like 22 stats or like?
It's a compilation of information. Yeah, it's put together by reviews of some of our major medical bodies. So yeah, it's huge, right? And so again, this is taking perimenopause, postmenopause, and thereafter. It's all of the hormone changes that happen around that time. So if we were to just take an average number, it's give or take everything that happens at the age of 45 onward. Again, this isn't something we need to be afraid of. That's absolutely not what I'm going for. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's helpful. But if we're aware that these things do happen, statistically, this is something that is so common, at the very least, we should know this is what that looks like. And then we should know, here's my options if all of that stuff or some of that stuff, because most people will get a piece here or there if they do experience something. If I get a piece of this and it's consistent with this, there's an answer, and we can often turn that off or help to smoothly transition to whatever the next step is. Like, it's just too often I have people that say, I feel like I'm myself again. I feel like I got myself back, or I feel so much better. Or in some cases, like my relationship with my partner, my relationship with my family is better because I'm more comfortable and I can be more of myself. Like, that is so important. We should absolutely be paying attention to opportunities to help people to that extent. And they're there. They're absolutely there.
Thank you very much, Dr. MacMillan. But for people who want to reach out to you, where can they go?
Yeah, well, the DelbrookIntegrative.com is the website for the clinic that we're at. My personal website, dr.lucasmacMillan, is where a lot of my personal information, some of the interviews and some of the pictures and some of that can be found, some articles that I wrote. We're always trying to increase information on them, so yeah, a plan is to build and get that out, but can always reach out at the clinic. I love chatting with people and love helping people to figure out what the next steps are. If we were the next step, I'm always happy to work with others. If not, try to make referrals, because chances are, whatever your goals are, there's somebody out there that can help. And I really try to be that central hub that if there's a need, there's an answer, I'll try to help you find it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. It's great seeing you again.
Thanks for watching. If you have a question or comment about today's episode, go to our website, which is runwithit.ca. Until next time, run with it. Run With It is sponsored by Mallory's Fashion Network, the Rio Theatre, Craft Academy Hair, and Dr. Lucas MacMillan, Delbrook Integrative Medical Centre.